I'm not going on this trip. Waking up 3 days before my family boarded that plane, I held a hand to my allergy-reddened cheek and sweetly saw them off on a flight that was doomed to crash. In my last life, they guilt-tripped me into going, and I died a horrible death in a foreign country. This time, I smiled and handed them their luggage. Have fun. After all, someone had to be in the audience for the live stream of their deadly vacation. I snapped my eyes open, a searing pain shooting from every joint like 1,000 red-hot needles. The cold that seeped into my bones was more chilling than the moment I was torn apart by wild animals in my last life. Right on cue, my sister-in-law Chloe's sickly sweet voice piped up. Mom, Dad, it's all arranged. As soon as Maddie's home from school, we'll charter a jet and take a trip abroad. That was the sentence. A poisoned icicle driven straight into my eardrum. In my last life, that glamorous-sounding offer had packaged up our whole family, no, their family and me, and delivered us straight to a carefully orchestrated death livestream. I shot up in bed, my eyes locking onto Chloe's smiling face. The flicker of greed and malice deep in her eyes was a perfect match for the one seared into my memory. I knew this woman was a monster to her core. All that polish and shine was just wrapping for the main event. A spectacular show of death she had prepared for the Lockhart family, or rather, a show prepared mostly for me. Oh, Chloe, you're just the best. So capable and so thoughtful. My mother, Sharon, gushed, pulling Chloe into a hug. Her face crinkled into a huge, beaming smile as praise spilled from her lips. My father, George, and my brother, Leo, looked on with eyes so bright they were practically glowing, like a couple of drooling puppies who'd just spotted a steak. The fawning was nauseating. I forced down the bile and hatred rising in my throat, and squeezed out a sycophantic grin that was uglier than a grimace. I grabbed Chloe's arm and, in the most naive, worldly ignorant voice I could muster, shrieked with excitement. Oh my God, Chloe, you're the best. My friends have all been abroad, and I've been dying to go. I'm going to buy so many snacks, and all those clothes and makeup the celebrities wear. I can't wait to show it all off to my roommates and make them jealous. And one of those super sparkly gemstone necklaces. You're so good to me, Chloe. You'll definitely buy me one, right? I deliberately pitched my voice higher, playing the part of a vain, greedy, uncultured idiot to perfection, my eyes glittering with a naked hunger for luxury and showing off. Sure enough, the moment the words left my mouth, my mother's beaming smile vanished, replaced by a stony glare. She ripped me away from Chloe, her grip so rough it felt like she was trying to tear my skin off. Crack. A loud, stinging slap landed squarely on my face. You worthless little brat, getting a little too big for your britches, are you? Who do you think you are, eyeing your sister-in-law's money? You have some nerve. You're not going anywhere this summer. You'll stay right here and watch the house. A fiery pain exploded across my left cheek, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. But I didn't feel the sting. Instead, a sick, exhilarating clarity spread through my limbs. My brother, Leo, didn't even bother to look up. He just crossed his arms, a smirk of pure contempt on his face. Her money is my money. Who the hell do you think you are, trying to spend it? Take a good long look in the mirror. The disdain in their eyes pricked at me like needles, but it didn't stir a single ripple of hurt, only cold, mocking amusement. Yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Clutching my rapidly swelling cheek, I let tears stream down my face like broken pearls. My voice choked with sobs as I wailed. Dad, Mom, I really want to go. Why can't you take me with you? I'm your daughter, too. My body trembled uncontrollably, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated excitement. I could barely suppress the manic laughter bubbling up from my chest. I knew that the greedier I appeared, the more I craved things that weren't mine, the less likely this profoundly selfish group of people would be to bring a burden like me along. My mother sneered, her eyes raking over me like daggers. She grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanked my head back, and stared down at me, hissing in a low voice only I could hear. I'm warning you, you little bitch, stay in your lane. Take a look at yourself. You think you deserve nice things? You think you were born for a life like that? I was forced to crane my neck back, my scalp screaming in protest, but I obediently lowered my eyes, feigning fear and submission. Inside, my mind was roaring. No, I wasn't born for that life. You were. You're the ones who get to enjoy the feast of death prepared just for you. A family should stick together after all. Seeing that I had been taught a lesson and had stopped crying and begging to go, they all looked satisfied. Chloe offered a few token words of comfort, saying I was just a kid and didn't know any better. My mother took the opportunity to back down, adding a few more instructions for me to behave while they were gone. Then, the family cheerfully began discussing the details of their trip, laughing and chatting as they left me alone in the living room. The lingering scent of their cheap perfume and smug satisfaction hung in the air. I walked slowly to the freezer, took out an ice pack, and gently pressed it to my burning cheek. The biting cold soothed the sting on my skin, but couldn't extinguish the inferno of revenge blazing in my heart. In my last life, my pathetic begging and their so-called sense of family duty led them to mercifully take me with them. And what was the result? I watched them die horribly, one by one, before I was subjected to endless torture and despair. This life, I played the long game and skillfully removed myself from the equation. It felt so good. This time, it would be my turn to get comfortable and watch how they marched, step by step, toward their own destruction. How the whole family would go to their deaths, all together. I closed my eyes. The terrifying images from before the plane crash, the desperate screams, the twisted faces, they all resurfaced in my mind, crystal clear. Every detail was like a chisel, carving the memory deeper and deeper. Good. These memories would be the sharpest weapons in my arsenal of revenge. Chloe, Sharon, George, Leo, your countdown has begun. A cold smile crept across my lips. First, I had to make absolutely, positively sure they would get on that death flight on time. That cold smile froze on my lips, hardening into the deepest of calculations in my heart. To guarantee they boarded that flight on time, I needed one more foolproof reason to get myself kicked off the family plan for good. The opportunity came quickly. A few days later, my adored little sister, Maddie, came home from school for the break. The second she stepped through the door, before she even had a chance to drop her backpack, she heard about the trip abroad. She started chirping like a little sparrow, throwing her arms around Chloe and cooing, "Chloe, you're the absolute best. I love you so much. I've been dreaming of going overseas. I'm going to take so many pictures and buy so many things. I can't wait to show off to my roommates and make them die of envy." My mother, Sharon, sat on the side, cracking sunflower seeds. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes bloomed with delight as she chimed in. That's right, that's right. Have your sister-in-law buy you all the big brands, bags, makeup, go crazy. Make all your little friends jealous. If you run out of money, just tell me. I'll cover it." I was in the kitchen, methodically washing vegetables. The sound of running water couldn't drown out the sickeningly cheerful laughter from the living room. But my heart was as calm as a deep, ancient well. Chloe's gaze drifted casually toward the kitchen, her voice still syrupy sweet. "Ava, we're leaving tomorrow. You should hurry and pack so you're not scrambling at the last minute." The moment she finished, Maddie's face fell into a pout. Her voice was so shrill it could have shattered glass. "Ugh, why does she have to come? She's such a buzzkill. She's so basic, it'd be embarrassing to have her around." Sharon shot me a venomous look from her narrow eyes. The warning was blatant, a clear signal for me not to agree, not to even dare utter the word go. I lowered my gaze and said nothing, grabbing another handful of greens and scrubbing them furiously. When I looked up again, I let an unmistakable longing, and a hint of hurt at being rejected, show in my eyes. At the dinner table, the family was a picture of perfect harmony, acting as if I were invisible. Chloe saw my pathetic expression, and a satisfied smile curved her lips. She picked up a piece of braised shrimp and placed it in my bowl, her voice gentle enough to melt butter. "Ava, eat up. Look how thin you are. You'll need your strength for the trip tomorrow." I stared at the glistening red shrimp in my bowl, its shell coated in a thick, savory sauce. My face fell, and my chopsticks hovered in the air as if it were some kind of monster I couldn't bring myself to touch. I knew I had a mild seafood allergy. They never cared about it on a normal day, but today, this shrimp was both my death sentence and my get-out-of-jail-free card. My brother, Leo, was the first to lose his patience. His brow furrowed as he slammed his chopsticks on the table with a sharp crack. "Ava, what's your problem? Who are you putting on a show for? Your sister-in-law is being nice to you, and you have the nerve to give her attitude? Who the hell do you think you are? Maddie added softly from the side, her voice dripping with contempt. Seriously. An ungrateful brat. Beside them, George's face darkened, and he grunted in disapproval. Under their combined interrogating stare, I looked as though I'd made a monumental decision. I clenched my jaw, picked up the shrimp, and shoved it into my mouth, thick sauce and all. The shrimp was fresh, but I couldn't taste a thing, only the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. It didn't take long for the reaction I was waiting for to begin. First, a fine itchy rash broke out on my neck and arms. Then, my cheeks began to burn and flush uncontrollably. My breathing grew ragged, and my throat felt clogged and so itchy I wanted to cough but couldn't. The little bit of seafood extract I'd hidden in my sleeve and secretly mixed into my drink, combined with this shrimp, was working perfectly. Oh my God, Ava, what's wrong? Chloe was the first to notice, crying out in alarm. The rest of the family finally saw what was happening and descended into chaos. Sharon muttered under her breath about what a troublemaker I was, but she moved quickly, yelling at Leo to drive me to the hospital. At the hospital, the diagnosis came back fast: acute allergic reaction, and a pretty serious one. I needed an IV drip immediately. Chloe's eyes were red-rimmed, and the usual cunning calculation in them was replaced with a look of pure guilt and worry. She gripped my hand tightly, her voice choked with emotion. Ava, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have given you that shrimp. I didn't know your allergy was this severe. Such a good actress. It was a crime she didn't have an Oscar. My brother, Leo, saw Chloe on the verge of tears and was heartbroken. He turned to me on the hospital bed, his eyes glaring and his voice filled with impatience and blame. Ava, if you're allergic, why didn't you just say so? Now look at this mess. You've made your sister-in-law so worried and guilty. What is wrong with you? The coldness radiating from his every word pricked at my skin. My whole body began to tremble. My face was pale as I squeezed Chloe's hand, looking up at her with tear-filled eyes. My voice was a weak whisper, but it carried a stubborn, sobbing plea. Chloe, I still want to go on the trip with you. I squeezed her hand so hard my nails nearly broke the skin. I clearly saw the perfect mask of concern on her face stiffen for a split second. A flash of shock and annoyance, almost imperceptible, crossed her eyes. Can't keep up the act, can you? The moment Maddie heard I was still thinking about the trip, her pretty face soured. No way. You absolutely cannot go, she shrieked. Look at you. You're covered in red spots, it's disgusting. What if something else happens on the trip? We'd have to waste our time taking care of you. And how could you even have fun? Just as she finished, my stomach lurched, and a wave of nausea rose in my throat. I couldn't hold it back any longer. Blia. A foul, acidic stream of vomit splattered almost entirely on Maddie's brand new designer sneakers, with a few drops hitting the hem of her skirt. Maddie had a complete meltdown. She let out a piercing scream, hopping up and down in disgust as tears streamed from her eyes like a busted dam. She pointed at me, wailing to our parents. Dad. Mom. Look at her. How can she possibly go now? I refuse to spend my vacation taking care of a sick person. This is so gross. My shoes. My skirt. Our father George's face was dark enough to drip ink. He looked at my wretched state, then at Maddie's tantrum, and his brow furrowed into deep lines. Finally, he brought his fist down with a decisive thud. That's enough. Ava, you're staying home to recover. You're not going this time. Maddie's crying stopped instantly. Her face cleared up as if a storm had just passed, and a triumphant smirk spread across her lips. She shot me a glance filled with the smug satisfaction of a winner. Chloe let out a fake sigh and patted my hand, comforting me softly. Ava, don't be sad. Your health is what's important. Once you're better, I'll take you on a separate trip, just the two of us, okay? I looked up weakly, my eyes full of gratitude and disappointment, and gave a small nod. Inside, I was screaming with joy. Yes. Perfect. Now they have absolutely no reason to drag their burden along on this trip to hell. It was late by the time my IV drip was finished. My parents, their faces grim, picked me up from the hospital. To celebrate finally being rid of me, their dead weight, and their upcoming trip, Sharon and George were in a rare good mood. They cooked a huge lavish feast, chicken, duck, fish, the aroma filling the house. And me? I had just thrown up my guts, my stomach was empty, and the doctor had ordered me to eat something bland. So while they feasted and laughed, I could only mix some plain white rice with hot water and a few pickles, eating in silence. After dinner, they all went back to their rooms to do a final check of their luggage, their excited chatter about the trip filling the living room. I lay alone in my small, dark room, listening to the noise outside, a sense of unprecedented peace and calm washing over me. I knew that a show, prepared just for them, was about to begin, and I would be the only, and most faithful, member of the audience. It rolled over. A sliver of moonlight shone through a crack in the curtains, casting a cold patch of light on the floor. It was as if I could already hear the roar of the plane's engines and their desperate, final screams. The cold moonlight outside my window hadn't fully faded when the first stirrings of movement came from downstairs. I knew it was time for them to leave. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Sharon's shrill voice pierced through the thin walls, dripping with undisguised anger. Ava, you worthless girl, don't think being sick gets you out of your chores. Get your ass out here and help your sister pack. I slowly dragged myself out of bed, the bland taste of last night's rice still in my stomach. In the living room, Maddie was curled up on the sofa, legs crossed, giggling at her phone. Mom, I don't want Ava packing for me, she said without looking up. Her taste is so basic. What if she packs some ugly outfit? How am I supposed to get my beautiful pictures? Forget it. I'll do it myself later, or I'll just have her stand there and follow my orders. Sharon shot me a look that said, You heard her. I walked into Maddie's room, a space nearly twice the size of my own, filled with the cloying scent of her favorite perfume. Growing up, this kind of favoritism was etched into my very bones. Looking back now, it was just laughable. I looked at the pile of clothes spread across her bed, all flashy, impractical styles, and a barely perceptible smile touched my lips. Maddie, I said in my most sincere tone, honestly, I don't think you need to bring anything. Didn't Chloe say she's going to buy you tons of designer stuff abroad? Those clothes will be way more fashionable than these. If you bring all this, you won't have room for the new things. Maddie's eyes lit up. She realized I had a point, immediately dropping the clothes and running out to hug Sharon's arm. Mom, Ava's right. Chloe's buying me new stuff, so I'm not going to bring these old things. It's so much better to travel light. Maddie's sweet talking had Sharon grinning from ear to ear. Of course, of course. Our Maddie will just wait for her new clothes and pretty pictures. The family did one last check of their minimal luggage and got ready to leave. Sharon walked up to me, her face twisting back into a nasty sneer as she lowered her voice. You behave yourself while we're gone. You can run the AC for 2 hours a day, Max got it? And don't just sit around the house wasting electricity. You're a grown woman now. It's about time you got a job and earned your own keep instead of having us support you. I kept my head down and obediently agreed, watching as they all walked out the door, beaming with excitement. Chloe even turned back to give me a gentle smile. The door slammed shut with a bang, cutting off the last of their noise. I stood there for a moment, thinking to myself, too bad you'll never get to spend that money. And you'll certainly never get to enjoy all those designer brands you're dreaming of. With that toxic crew gone, I went straight to my room and dragged out my dusty GRE prep books from under the bed. In my last life, all my efforts and dreams were buried in that sudden, horrific death live stream. This life, without them dragging me down, I would get into the grad school of my dreams and live my own life. I spent the entire day at the library. That evening, I returned to the empty house and ordered a lavish takeout meal I never would have dared to dream of before. Spicy crawfish and my favorite Sichuan boiled fish. After eating my fill, I pulled another phone, one I kept hidden from everyone, out of the back of a drawer and expertly typed in an encrypted URL. The screen flickered to life, revealing a simple live stream interface. The broadcast had already started. In a dim forest, the light filtered through dense layers of leaves, leaving only mottled shadows on the ground. My father, George my mother, Sharon my brother, Leo and my coddled sister, Maddie were all there. They were blindfolded, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles as if they'd been thrown carelessly to the ground. Their clothes were caked with dirt and grass, Their carefully styled hair was a mess, and their faces were blank with shock. Their luggage was nowhere in sight. Maddie was the first to break. She ripped off her blindfold, saw the unfamiliar surroundings, and shrank into Sharon's arms, her teeth chattering. "Mom, where are we? I'm so scared." Sharon held her tightly, her face pale as she frantically scanned their surroundings. George was slightly calmer. He pulled out his phone, held it high, and waved it around anxiously, muttering, "No signal, damn it, not a single bar." Leo was just furious. With his hands on his hips, he yelled into the dark woods, "Who the hell is messing with us? Get your asses out here. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know my wife is Chloe? If you know what's good for you, you'll send us back right now, or you'll regret it." The forest was silent, save for the echo of his impotent rage, which sounded utterly ridiculous. Night quickly devoured the last of the light, and the temperature in the forest dropped sharply. The four of them could only huddle together, sharing body heat for warmth. Hunger was an invisible hand, squeezing their stomachs. Maddie was the first to crack. Her face was ashen as she whimpered, "Mom, I'm hungry. I'm so hungry." Sharon hugged her, her heart aching as she tried to comfort her. George and Leo exchanged a look, then clenched their jaws and got up. "We'll go look for some fruit or something to eat nearby." A short while later, terrified screams and the sound of frantic footsteps erupted from the woods. The two of them came scrambling back, their faces contorted in terror as they roared, "Run! Something's out there! Run!" Before they could finish, a series of blood-curdling howls grew closer. A pack of lean, hungry wolves, their eyes glowing an eerie green in the darkness, burst from the trees like arrows shot from a bow. Sharon instinctively stood up but looked back to see Maddie frozen in fear, still sitting on the ground. Just as a wolf lunged, its jaws wide open, Sharon screamed and, without a second thought, threw herself over Maddie. The wolf's sharp teeth sank mercilessly into Sharon's thigh. With the sound of tearing fabric, a bloody chunk of flesh was ripped away. Sharon's face went white with pain. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, and her body trembled violently, but she held Maddie tight, letting out muffled whimpers. I watched this touching scene on the live stream, a deep sense of irony flashing in my eyes. What a great mother's love. Too bad I never got to experience even a fraction of it in my last life, only endless beatings and contempt. George and Leo snapped out of it, scrambling to pick up dry branches from the ground and swing them wildly, trying to drive the wolves away. Maddie was crying and fumbling, trying to pull Sharon to her feet and run, but how could two legs outrun four? Soon, the wolves had them completely surrounded, cutting off any chance of escape. "Get in the tree! Climb the tree!" George yelled, scrambling up a relatively sturdy tree trunk. Leo followed right behind him. The two of them then worked together, and with tremendous effort, managed to pull the blood-soaked Sharon and the terrified Maddie up after them. Dark red blood dripped from Sharon's pant leg, soaking into the bark and releasing a thick, metallic scent that attracted even more predators lurking in the shadows. Below, the pack of wolves grew larger. They paced restlessly, letting out low growls. Some even started ramming the tree trunk, trying to knock it over, while others clawed futilely at the bark. The family of four huddled together on an unsteady branch, their faces ashen and their bodies shaking uncontrollably from cold and fear. I saw the livestream's comment section exploding, a flood of gleeful and mocking comments scrolling by at lightning speed. The mysterious host typed out a line at just the right moment. "In 2 days, we'll see whether the bonds of family are more important than one's own life." The smile on my face grew colder. The show was just getting started. There was much more to come. In the live stream, the host's chilling words hung on the screen. "In 2 days, we'll see whether the bonds of family are more important than one's own life." The curve of my lips deepened. For the next 2 days, I lived in blissful peace. I spent my days in the library and my nights ordering takeout, watching the screen as they were slowly stripped of their facades by hunger, cold, and fear. 2 days later, the beasts circling the tree seemed to get a signal, or perhaps were drawn away by something new, and gradually dispersed. On screen, George and Leo, their faces sallow from hunger, cautiously climbed down from the tree after confirming it was safe. Sharon's leg was still bleeding, and Maddie was curled up nearby, her eyes vacant. George looked back at Leo, and without a word to his wife and daughter still in the tree, he limped off into the woods. A moment later, Leo let out a cry of delight. He pulled a bulging backpack from under a large tree. He opened it to find a few bottles of water, a few cans of Spam, and a bunch of compressed biscuits and bread. Leo's eyes lit up, and he grabbed the backpack to head back. Wait! George stopped him, his wrinkled face as dark as a thundercloud. He lowered his voice, his eyes glancing back toward Sharon and Maddie. If the four of us split this, it'll be gone in 2 days. Your mother's leg, I don't think she's making it out of this forest. The joy on Leo's face froze. He swallowed hard, his eyes greedily fixed on the backpack, then looked back at his weakened mother and sister in the tree. That pitiful moment of hesitation lasted only a few seconds. He nodded grimly, stuffed the backpack back into the tree hollow, and carefully covered it with dead leaves. The two of them wolfed down a portion of the food, then picked a few sour wild berries nearby, and casually strolled back. I took a sip of the Coke beside me, the cool, sweet liquid sliding down my throat. See? In the face of death, so-called family bonds are pathetically cheap. When Maddie got the shriveled wild berries, she abandoned all her usual pretenses and swallowed them in a few bites. Sharon watched her with a complicated expression before pushing her own portion toward her, muttering, "You eat it, Maddie. Mom's not hungry." Night fell, and the forest was terrifyingly quiet. Maddie tossed and turned, unable to sleep, her stomach growling loudly. In the darkness, Leo quietly got up and beckoned to Maddie. Her eyes lit up, and she tiptoed after him. When Maddie saw the bread and Spam, she nearly drooled. She lunged for a piece of bread and stuffed it in her mouth, mumbling, "You're the best, Leo. All this food, I'll go get Mom to have some too." Leo clamped a hand over her mouth and shook his head, his eyes dark. He pointed at the food, then back toward Sharon. "Don't tell her. There's not much left. If it's just the two of us, we can last a few more days." Maddie paused for a second, then nodded vigorously and went back to gnawing on the bread. I smirked. "Oh, Sharon. The precious children you doted on, the ones you couldn't bear to see hurt, would abandon you in a heartbeat for a few bites of food." Sharon wasn't really asleep. Hunger was gnawing at her insides like a swarm of insects. In a daze, she saw what looked like crumbs on Maddie's mouth. She shot upright, grabbing Maddie's arm, her eyes flashing with a terrifying light in the darkness. "Maddie, were you eating something? Where did you get it? Why didn't you tell me? I'm starving to death." Maddie jumped, her head bowed in guilt, unable to meet her mother's eyes. Seeing this, Sharon knew everything. She trembled with rage, her voice cracking. You ungrateful brat. You had food and didn't tell your own mother? Were you trying to starve me to death? After everything I've done for you?" Her shouting woke George and Leo. George saw the equally guilty look on Leo's face, grunted, and cleared his throat. He spoke to Sharon in a cold voice. "All right, since you know, let's just get it all out in the open. With your leg like that, you can't walk. You're just a burden, and you'll waste food. Here's a little something to eat and a bottle of water. Ration it. Whether you live or die is up to you now." With that, he pulled a small packet of biscuits and a bottle of water from his pocket, threw them in front of Sharon, and then grabbed Leo and Maddie and walked away without looking back. Sharon completely broke down. She looked at the pathetic amount of food, then at the retreating backs of her husband and children, and let out a heart-wrenching sob. "George, you animal. We've been married for over 20 years, and you just leave me like this? Lao. Maddie, come back. I'm your mother. How could you do this to me?" Her injured leg was useless. All she could do was pound her fists against the cold ground, her cries echoing pitifully. Maddie's steps faltered for a moment, as if she was having second thoughts, but Leo shot her a harsh glare and pulled her along faster. They quickly disappeared into the darkness. Sharon's crying faded, her eyes becoming vacant. Her face, streaked with dirt and tears, was a mask of utter despair. I laughed so hard tears almost came to my eyes. "Sharon, the greatest sin you ever committed was bringing me, the ghost who came to collect your debt, into this world. Heaven gave me a second chance for the sole purpose of ensuring you would die without a grave." A few days later, their meager food supply ran out. The three of them, so hungry they were seeing stars, stumbled through the forest. Then, just as it happened to me in my last life, they were kidnapped. Several masked, burly men wielding gleaming machetes surrounded them. A cold blade pressed against their necks as the leader let out a sinister laugh. Haha, we'll give you a chance to live. Me and my boys are a little short on cash, and we could use some entertainment. Leave one of you behind for us to play with. The other two will not only let you go, we'll give you some food and see you out of this forest. He drew out the words play with, his tone dripping with malicious intent. Maddie's face went chalk white, and her body trembled like a leaf. She looked at George and Leo in terror, shaking her head as tears streamed down her face. George's expression shifted rapidly. He glanced at the trembling Maddie, then at the equally grim-faced Leo. Finally, he took a deep breath, his voice hoarse and low, laced with a deliberately crafted sorrow. Maddie, you have to understand. You're a girl. The Lockhart family name, it depends on your brother to carry it on. Leo immediately caught on, chiming in. Yeah, sis. You just have to bear with it for a bit. As soon as I get out, I promise I'll find a way to come back and save you. The kidnappers roared with laughter. George and Leo, as if granted a pardon, were untied and scrambled away, never once daring to look back at Maddie. Maddie closed her eyes in despair, 2 lines of clean tears cutting through the grime on her cheeks. This scene was so similar to my own last life. On the live stream, the kidnappers closed in on Maddie with leering smiles. The scenes that followed were bloody and brutal. I watched without expression, my fingers clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Maddie's piercing screams echoed through the woods until one of the kidnappers, annoyed, grabbed her by the hair and slammed her head against a nearby rock. With a sickening thud, a bloody tooth flew out. Her screams stopped abruptly, and her body went limp. The kidnapper spat and kicked her dismissively. Damn, she died. Can't even take a little roughhousing. A single, casual sentence, and Maddie's death was sealed. I let out a long, slow breath. The massive weight that had been crushing my heart for years suddenly shattered. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I covered my face, letting out choked sobs. This was the nightmare that had replayed in my mind countless times. Now it was finally over. I could finally get a good night's sleep. But the live stream wasn't over. The camera cut away, and soon George and Leo, the 2 pathetic survivors, were tied up again. This time, a familiar figure stood before them, Chloe. She was still smiling, as gentle and lovely as ever, but her smile was laced with the world's most venomous poison. Well, hello there, she purred, her voice as sweet as ever. Now I'm going to give you a real chance. Only one of you gets to live. Whoever kills the other will not only be escorted safely out of here with a phone to call the police, but I'll also give you an extra $100,000 for your pain and suffering. Hearing this, George and Leo's faces turned paler than death. The desire to live, the greed for money, and the last remnants of father-son affection warred in their eyes. Finally, a vicious glint appeared in George's cloudy eyes. He picked up a rusty machete one of the kidnappers handed him, and stared malevolently at Leo. You ungrateful whelp. I gave you your life, and today I'm taking it back. If I live, maybe you'll be reborn into our family in the next life. Leo was not about to go down without a fight. His eyes bloodshot, he snatched a sharp axe from another kidnapper, his voice twisted with fear and rage. Dad, you're an old man. This chance belongs to a young guy like me. The Lockhart family line needs me to carry it on. Before the words were even out, the 2 of them, like cornered beasts, roared and lunged at each other. The clash of the axe and machete was followed by the tearing of flesh. Both were quickly covered in wounds, their blood staining the ground. Suddenly, Leo let out a primal scream. Spotting an opening, he brought the axe down with all his might. Thwack! George's body split like a log, his torso separating from his legs. His upper body rolled to the ground, his eyes wide open in a final, unseeing stare. Hot blood splattered across Leo's face. He stood there, gasping for air, his face covered in blood, sweat, and the manic look of a survivor. Chloe clapped her hands, her smile growing wider. Congratulations, Leo. You win. Behind her, several men in black slowly walked forward. Leo looked at them, the madness on his face slowly fading, replaced by a wary unease. Behind Chloe, the men in black closed in. The crazed look on Leo's face evaporated, replaced by thick, suffocating fear. He had just killed his own father. He was the victor of the death match, but he was still slated to die. I survived. I won. Now let me go. Leo shrieked at Chloe, oblivious to the blood covering him, his voice a desperate, incoherent plea. Chloe remained smiling sweetly. She snapped her fingers, and one of the men handed her a phone. As promised, here's your chance to make a call. Leo snatched the phone as if it were a lifeline, and fumbled to dial my number. The ringtone blared in my quiet room. I glanced at the screen, saw the name Leo, and a cold smile touched my lips. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. On the live stream, the look on Leo's face shifted from frantic to furious, laced with a deepening terror. How interesting. He wasn't afraid of dying, but he was afraid of me not answering his call. The second call came almost immediately. I answered it slowly, my voice calm and flat. Hello. Ava. Ava. You have to save me. Please save me. They're going to kill me. They're really going to kill me. Leo's voice was so shrill it could have pierced my eardrum, filled with absolute terror. I let out a small, contemptuous laugh, my voice as soft as a whisper from hell. Brother, how would I know where you are? And why would they kill you? Weren't you the one who just stood by and watched Mom get abandoned, and personally handed our sister over to a bunch of thugs? Oh, and was that you who killed Dad with an axe? I saw the whole thing, brother. I enunciated every single word with perfect clarity. On the other end of the line, Leo went silent. On the live stream, he whipped his head around, his eyes wild with terror, as if a pair of eyes were watching him from behind every leaf in the forest. No, it wasn't me. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't do anything. You're lying. You're lying, he screamed, his voice breaking. I watched his pathetic performance on the screen, completely unmoved. If Maddie was the one who openly poured her malice onto me, then Leo was the snake, hiding in the shadows, flicking its venomous tongue. When we were kids, he'd egg Maddie on to bully me in new and creative ways, and convince our parents to beat and curse me. His methods were endless and cruel, all for the simple pleasure of watching me suffer. Was he afraid of being a murderer? No, he wasn't. He was only afraid of his dirty deeds being exposed. And now, I had seen all of his sins. Arg. Leo let out a desperate, animalistic roar, suddenly broke free from the men holding him, and like a mad beast, slammed his head into a jagged rock. Thud. After the dull impact, the world went quiet. He crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from his forehead, his eyes wide open, forever staring into nothing. I let out a long, slow breath, the tension in my nerves finally releasing completely. The oppressive weight that had been crushing my heart for days seemed to dissipate with Leo's death. So good. Humming a tuneless song, I happily packaged the livestream link and sent it anonymously to the police. Then I treated myself to a celebratory feast, spicy crawfish, Sichuan boiled fish, and ate until I was completely satisfied. Everyone who had ever hurt me had gotten what they deserved. Even the boring practice questions at the library seemed to have a certain charm now. That evening, as I was leaving the library, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello, am I speaking with Ms. Ava Lockhart? A robotic male voice asked. Your mother, Miss Sharon Lockhart, is in our hospital. Her situation is a bit complicated. We need you to come as soon as possible. My heart skipped a beat. Sharon? Shouldn't she be dead in some remote forest overseas, her bones gnawed clean by wild animals? Could it be a scam call? Not wanting to take any chances, I hailed a cab and gave the hospital's name. Walking into the sterile-smelling hospital room, I immediately saw Sharon lying in the bed. Her leg was in a thick cast. She was so thin she was barely recognizable, with sunken eyes, a sallow complexion, and dry, matted hair. She looked nothing like her old self. I couldn't believe it. With just those few pathetic biscuits and water George had thrown at her, she had actually managed to survive that hellscape. Her will to live was truly tenacious. I pushed down the hatred churning inside me, and was about to put on a show of concern when Sharon's eyes flew open. Her cloudy eyes locked onto me, blazing with a fierce, venomous hatred. Her voice was hoarse but sharp. Ava. You bitch. You were reborn too, weren't you? Why didn't you warn us? Why did you just stand by and watch us all walk to our deaths? A chill ran down my spine. Sharon, she was reborn too. And she had the gall to stand here and demand to know why I didn't save them? On what grounds? On the grounds of her years of endless abuse and favoritism? On the grounds of George's cold indifference? On the grounds of Leo and Maddie's daily torment? I wanted them all dead, buried in unmarked graves. Seeing me silent, Sharon struggled to raise her good arm, trying to slap me across the face. You jinx. You curse. I should have strangled you at birth. Since she had laid it all out, there was no need for me to pretend anymore. I caught her swinging hand and twisted her wrist outward. In her weakened state, Sharon was as fragile as a dry leaf. The motion nearly sent her tumbling off the bed. She grunted in pain, her face turning red. You're rebelling now, she shrieked, trembling with rage, ready to throw another fit. I sneered and shut her down with a single sentence. Mom, that bitch Chloe ruined our family, killed Dad, and got our siblings killed. How can we not call the police on her? Sharon froze, her eyes darting back and forth. As if just realizing the opportunity, she grabbed the phone from her bedside table and shakily dialed 911. The police arrived quickly. The moment Sharon saw the officers, her tears started flowing like a flood. Snot and tears streaming down her face, she recounted their tragic ordeal abroad in broken sentences, embellishing the story to paint herself as a pitiful victim. She kept hinting at how rich and powerful Chloe's family was, clearly hoping to extort a huge sum of money from her. I stood to the side, sneering inwardly. Too bad, Sharon. Your plan is going to fail. Chloe isn't just a total fraud, she's a broke, desperate criminal. As expected, after hearing her tearful account, the young officer taking notes looked at us with a sympathetic expression. Just then, I pulled a thick folder of documents from my bag and handed it to the officer, my voice clear and firm. Officer, I'd like to formally report George and Sharon Lockhart for long-term child abuse and the illegal misappropriation of my personal assets. Sharon's sunken, cloudy eyes were fixed on my face, a twisted mask of venom and disbelief. I met her gaze calmly, my words dropping into her ears one by one. George Lockhart was not my biological father. He was my real father's older brother. Her body shuddered as if struck by an invisible current. My real parents died in a car crash when I was 1 year old. They left behind a sizable inheritance and me, their infant daughter. I looked at her, my smile devoid of any warmth. You and George coveted that money. You offered to raise me and then told everyone you'd won the lottery. Maddie was born around the same time, wasn't she? So you felt perfectly justified in weaving your web of lies, heaping all your frustrations and abuse onto me. I never understood why, even if I was the second child, the neglected one, I was treated with such utter cruelty. It wasn't until after I died in my last life that I learned this earth-shattering secret. I was never their daughter at all. In that moment, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of relief. The file I handed the police contained everything. A clear record of every dollar they had spent on me over the years, the original balance of my parents' accounts, stacks of horrifying medical reports from my injuries, and statements from neighbors and friends about how they doted on me. It was all there, documented in black and white. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of her. Her eyes darted around in a panic. She suddenly reached out with her good hand, trying frantically to snatch the file from the officer, screaming, "Lies! It's all lies. Don't believe her." Her clumsy, self-incriminating performance was nothing more than a desperate, last-ditch effort in the eyes of the police. The lead officer signaled his partner to secure the evidence and then addressed Sharon professionally. "We will open an investigation into this matter. Until you have recovered, we will have an officer posted here to watch you." The police left the room, leaving the two of us alone. I walked slowly to Sharon's bedside, leaned down, and whispered in a voice only she could hear. "You were right. I knew everything from the start. I watched you, step by step, walk into the abyss." Her pupils contracted sharply. "You were abandoned in the forest by the son and husband you adored, left to fend for yourself. Your favorite little daughter, Maddie, was handed over to a group of thugs by her own father and brother to be tortured to death. And your precious son, Leo, after killing your husband with his own hands, smashed his head against a rock in despair. I savored the way her expression cracked and shattered, my voice growing even softer. Sharon, your family is destroyed. You're all alone now. And soon, you'll have to face the judgment of the law. Are you happy with how things turned out? My words seemed to detonate something inside her. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and her withered body shrank back as if I were a demon come to claim her soul. You're a monster. It was you. You killed them all. I'll kill you. I'll kill you, you bitch. She shrieked, struggling to lunge at me. Crack. I slapped her hard across the face, silencing her madness. Say whatever you want. The police won't believe you, I said coldly. Chloe planned the whole death trip. The phone Maddie used to watch the live stream was her own old phone. The money donated to the live stream came from George's secret stash. Even Leo's final call for help came from an overseas number. I can just say I thought it was a scam call. It's perfectly normal not to answer. One by one, I sealed off every possible loophole she could grasp. I had left no openings. By the end of the year, the northern weather was bone-chillingly cold. On the day of my grad school entrance exam, fat snowflakes began to fall. I walked out of the exam hall and let out a long, deep breath. The regret of not being able to take the test in my last life was finally resolved. I was sure I would get in. Everything that followed went as I had predicted. Chloe was arrested and, with her multiple crimes, sentenced to decades in prison. The police followed the trail from the secret livestream site, busting it and arresting a large number of criminals who had been hiding in the dark. Sharon, for abuse, illegal appropriation of assets, and a slew of other charges including being an accessory, was sentenced to over 20 years. The vast majority of her remaining life would be spent behind cold, iron bars. The court-ordered compensation, combined with the inheritance from my real parents, wiped out the Lockhart family's entire savings and was returned to me, down to the last cent. Holding the heavy bank card, I suddenly felt my heart fill. The last thing my parents had left me was finally back in my hands. No one could ever take it away again. Spring came, and with it my grad school interview. Everything went smoother than I could have imagined. I bought a bouquet of white daisies and went to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. On the headstone, photos of my real parents were placed side by side. They were both smiling so gently, their eyes curved as they looked at me. I looked so much like them. My nose was like my dad's, my eyes like my mom's. How stupid I'd been. I had lived for over 20 years in my last life, and never once noticed that I looked nothing at all like George and Sharon. I was never their daughter. I gently placed the flowers down, my fingertips tracing the cold stone. In the photos, their warm smiles seemed to transcend time. Dad, Mom, I said softly, my voice catching slightly. You can rest easy now. I've gotten revenge for you. From now on, no one can ever bully me or hurt me again. As for grad school, I think I'm going to get in. I can be happy on my own, so please don't worry about me up in heaven. Go ahead and be reborn. In my next life, I still want to be your daughter. Just as I finished speaking, a gentle breeze brushed against my cheek, carrying a faint, illusory warmth, like my mother's soft kiss. The next second, my cheeks were wet. Tears, like broken strands of pearls, rolled down my face uncontrollably, splashing onto the white petals. Mom, Dad, I really wish I could see you just one more time. My phone buzzed gently in my pocket. I sniffled, wiped my face messily, and pulled it out. On the screen was a text message. Congratulations, Ms. Ava Lockhart. You have successfully passed the master's program admissions interview for our university. Please. I got in. I wiped my tears and, looking at the smiling faces of my parents on the headstone, I broke into a radiant smile of my own. See, I told you I could do it. I'm going to live my own life, and I'm going to be happier than anyone. Even without my mom and dad, I can make my life absolutely wonderful. And just in case they can't let go, they'll be watching me from some distant star, smiling.